We are talking about podcasting.
Okay.
Podcasters talking
It's
about
very meta.
podcasting. It's so meta. But it's important because there's a whole heap of stuff I feel like I've learned in the last, 12 months or so of doing this podcast with you, and also of coming into II studios and looking after the research side of things.
Mhm.
And podcasting became such a major topic of conversation when Trump came into power and in the run up to the elections in the US. But when I was trying to understand metrics for the podcasting industry as a whole, which shows are popular, how many downloads are they actually getting, how much money are they making, I couldn't find really reliable sources of information around that.
When it comes to measuring or tracking metrics, right? There's no single method, and there's no single unit that we're measuring that tells us which shows are doing what. But if we're not all measuring the same thing as an industry, how do we know the state of the industry?
Roots and Rigour, Rigour and flow. Roots and Rigour, Rigour and flow. Roots and Rigour, Rigour and flow. Rigour and flow.
One.
Welcome back to Rigour and Flow.
With me, Aiwan,
And me, Tamanda.
the show where business meets love.
And culture meets critique.
What are we doing today? What are we talking about?
We are talking about podcasting.
Okay.
Podcasters talking
It's very
about
meta.
podcasting. It's so meta. But it's important because there's a whole heap of stuff I feel like I've learned in the last, 12 months or so of doing this podcast with you, and also of coming into II studios and looking after the research side of things. And podcasting became such a major topic of conversation when Trump came into power and in the run up to the elections in the US. And I feel like there is so much to unpack about the role podcasting is playing in society. So I have a ton of questions for you. You, the person who introduced me to the industry that is podcasting, and a load of stuff I want us to unpack and figure out together now. We've been doing this a while.
Sounds good. Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm going to start with a question to you.
Go ahead.
Which is, you are my podcasting guru, but how did you actually get into podcasting? How did you actually get here, and what was the journey from your point of view?
So the thing with me is that I was listening to podcasts before I knew the term podcast. So Apple had a platform called iTunes.
Oh, yeah.
And you used iTunes to listen to your music back when you actually owned music. So you'd have all your MP3s and you put them into iTunes and you'd categorize it, get it all organized. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, exactly.
And then they had this feature on iTunes where you could essentially access like broadcasts of things. So people talking about things. And then it would automatically via something, well, it's now known as an RSS feed. It would automatically download the latest episodes of that person's broadcast, for want of a better term.
Right.
And then you could put them onto your iPod, which was basically a way of playing your MP3 files on the move.
Okay, for the youngers, what year are we talking? Because some people are thinking you're talking about the 18th century here.
No, yeah, definitely not the 18th century, but early 2000s we're talking. So
you came to it early.
Yeah, I came to it early, but I didn't know it was it wasn't really
exactly. It was. I remember that. I just didn't
Yeah.
even think about that as the origin story of podcasting. Yeah.
And I used to listen to people like Dave Ramsey, who still has a show.
Who's Dave Ramsey? Sorry, I don't.
So Dave Ramsey is a financial guy. He has a show called The Dave Ramsey Show, and he talks about financial things. So getting yourself out of debt, becoming financially free. He has loads of methods. He brings people on to talk about their issues and also their triumphs as well.
Okay.
And then he coaches people in how to become financially free.
Okay.
And for me back then, struggling, as I've spoken about on this show, struggling with like money and understanding it and how it flows, how to make it work for me, how to get out of debt. His show, along with a couple of others, was really, really important. So there was a guy called Desi Cerna who he was a guitar teacher. He is a guitar teacher. And he had basically episodes that talked about learning guitar, right? So he would teach you scales and different ways to place your fingers on the fretboard, technique, all of that good stuff. And so those were two shows that were really, really important to me. There was another show called No More Mondays, which was about getting free from the 9 to 5. It's right up my alley. Listen, do you know
It's
what I mean?
like you in a nutshell.
It's me in a nutshell.
And they were called broadcasts at the time.
So the term podcast came around 2004. And it's basically something called a portmanteau, which is pod came from iPod and cast comes from broadcast.
Okay.
And you put them together and you've got a podcast.
Okay.
So it's basically like a portable broadcast that you can take with you.
Okay.
And it basically syndicates or draws down the episodes of a show automatically. So they're there for you to listen on the go.
Do you know what? Every time I think you're my podcast guru, you come forth with greater guruhood. Like, I did not know this genesis story
I'm
of
far from a
podcasting.
Guru. There are some guys out there who are obsessed with podcasting
Really?
and all that it entails.
Okay,
and
wow.
they could tell you some next level stuff about podcasting.
I feel so naive.
But essentially, sometimes I do when I'm around some of those guys. But essentially, that's what a podcast is.
Okay.
And that's when the term was coined, and that's what where the term comes from.
Okay.
Right. So it's the iPod really is what defined a podcast as a podcast. Right. So yeah, I've been listening to podcasts before I knew that they were podcasts. When I realized it was called a podcast was way, way later. So we're talking 2018. I was working with Gaudem on a live storytelling event that they had. They asked me to come and be the audio engineer. I decided to record it at the same time and upsell my skills, as you do. And I said, hey, I recorded this thing. Here, take this thing, have a little listen. If you want to use it, feel free. I just want you to know that I can also record as well. The woman who was in charge of it loved it. She was like, this is amazing. They had a show on Represent Radio at the time. And they were like, I wonder if we can use this on the show. But there were loads of legal ramifications and they couldn't. But now they knew that I was an audio engineer who could record and mix and
do
master
live sound,
and do live sound, right? Yeah. So then they wanted to do a version of the storytelling, but without the legal ramifications of just recording people without them knowing and their personal stories and stuff like that. And so they said, can you do podcasts? And I was just like, I feel like this could be work and therefore money. Yes, I can do podcasts. I absolutely can do podcasts.
I know exactly what they are.
And I had to go away and look up what is a podcast.
Yeah.
And then I realized it's audio.
Yeah. Which is
that's it.
Your bread and butter.
Do you know what I mean? So I was like, yeah, of course I could do a podcast. When are we starting?
Yeah.
And that was the birth of Growing Up with Gaudem, the show that I ended up producing 8 seasons of. And so that was my introduction to the term podcast.
Okay.
But I had actually been listening to podcasts this whole time. I just didn't know of it as a podcast. It was just some stuff on iTunes.
Okay.
So that's that.
Wow, that's so fascinating. So you've been at the podcasting game as a producer of podcasts for
And an editor, audio engineer.
8 years? No?
Yeah, I think it would be about
terrible.
7.
7.
Yeah.
And it became, well, obviously I'm now working for IR Studios and I know like how many we have in our catalogue now, and that podcasting became absolutely core.
Yeah.
But how was that for you? Because you would have transitioned from a career prior to that in the entertainment industry, right? Within sound, I know you did TV and film. What was podcasting like relative to those? Was that an easy transition?
Podcasting, in terms of technically, it's actually very easy relative to the other mediums that I've worked in that you mentioned, because it is really just mics and people talking into them and then editing down just an audio file, which is way easier than all the different layers you have in like TV and film where, you know, for example, let's just take a film, for example, you've got to shoot the actual thing, right? And then you've
not in a controlled environment like this as well.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It depends. If it's a scripted drama, it's controlled.
Okay.
I work predominantly in documentary and it's completely not controlled.
Yeah.
So you're running around with cameras in the wild trying to capture things and wrangle people, right? And then of course you've got the sound along with the visual.
Yeah.
Then you have to go into the studio and then you edit.
Yeah.
And then you've got the sound mix.
Yeah.
You've got the sound design.
Yeah.
You've got the music. You've got the color grade.
Yeah.
You've got all of these different things that you have to do to make a film or a TV program a program.
Yeah.
Whereas with podcasting, it's what we're doing now.
Yeah.
It's just a couple of people on a mic and it's just audio, particularly in the beginning before YouTube and then video podcast became a thing, right? So it felt easy to do from a technical standpoint.
Yeah.
But in terms of the industry itself, it felt like the Wild West. It's a very young medium. So I'm talking early 2000s. So we're talking 20 plus years as a medium, right? TV and film have been going for at least 100.
Yeah.
Do
Yeah.
you know what I
It's a
mean?
whole different ball game.
It's a different ball
Established
game.
industries. Yeah.
Yeah. So these are industries that are established in terms of how they're made, the infrastructure that surrounds them in terms of like big studios and all the other ancillary industries that sort of support that main industry.
Yeah.
And then the crucial one is regulation,
Yeah.
right? Because in the UK anyway, we have something called Ofcom,
Right.
the Office of Communications.
Yeah.
And they are the ones who regulate TV and film, and they set what the rules are for, you know, decency and so on and so forth. In film, we have the BBFC. So that's the British Board of Film Classification. So they're the ones who will give a film its rating.
Yeah.
So is it a 12? Is it PG?
Is it a
Parental
U?
guidance. Is it a U?
18?
Whichever one, universal.
Yes,
Is it 18? So
Yeah.
only adults can watch it.
Yeah.
So they govern, they essentially
content and how it reaches the people.
Precisely.
And what's appropriate, right?
Yeah. And there's a way for you to complain. So for example, if someone says something on the TV that you think is inappropriate,
Yeah.
you can complain to Ofcom.
Yeah.
And then if there's enough people who've complained about that thing, they will look into it.
Yeah, exactly.
So an example is like at my church that I used to be head of sound at, the mega church, our pastor would say all sorts on his TV channel. And he had a TV channel that was on, like you could go on Sky and press your remote and go to his channel, right?
Oh, wow.
And he would come on a Sunday and claim that this person has been healed of cancer. And then another person will come and say, yes, I was healed of tuberculosis or whatever it was because of the prayer of the man of God.
Yeah.
And then of course, Ofcom are like, you can't say things like that.
Yeah.
Because in saying something like that, you're saying to certain people who are, impressionable or
or vulnerable,
sort of thing, or
vulnerable to coercion and need help.
And you're saying to them, you can bypass traditional scientific medicine and just get a prayer and be healed.
Yeah.
And that's incorrect. So Ofcom governs broadcast communications essentially, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And it means that, and so our pastor had beef. He was always shouting about Ofcom from the pulpit. Always. It was like, Ofcom? Who is Ofcom? God is the final authority, and it was just
what kind of run-ins did he have with them?
All sorts, the cancer thing, the AIDS, healing people of AIDS.
Oh, no.
Just a whole bunch of stuff. It was really quite chaotic. Podcasting isn't regulated the way the more established mediums are regulated.
Mm-hmm.
Parts of the podcasting industry are regulated. So if you think about the BBC, so in the UK, we have the British Broadcast Corporation, and they are a public broadcaster. And so they are regulated by Ofcom because they obviously have radio and they have TV. And so their podcasting, which is BBC Sounds, is also regulated.
Yeah, it's publicly funded as well. So the duty is presumably pretty important to create a certain kind of content.
Precisely.
Yeah.
So once you come outside of the BBC and big institutions like that, it's not regulated.
Mm.
And that's it, right? On top of that, the way you distribute podcasts is through something called a RSS feed.
Yeah.
And RSS stands for really simple syndication.
Okay, I still don't know what that means. So can you explain?
Basically, the critical term is syndication, which is just a way to distribute things.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? So you can syndicate a show. So I want to syndicate 100 episodes of this particular TV show I've created to different territories.
Okay, so it's like a distribution channel,
essentially,
and how you share the medium.
And
in
it's
this
really
case,
simple.
Audio. Okay,
yeah. So we distribute our episodes by something called an RSS feed, right? That feed is open source. Right? So it's not proprietary. Like, for example, Apple's operating system, iOS or OS, their operating system, is proprietary. Only Apple own it.
Yeah.
And therefore you have to buy an Apple product in order to use iOS. For example.
Okay.
With the RSS feed, Nobody
open
owns it. It's
source.
open source. Anybody can use it at any time.
Which is why you can have the same podcast presumably distributed on Spotify,
Exactly.
on Apple,
Exactly.
on the internet,
Exactly.
on YouTube. Is that the reason? Because no one,
Yeah.
it's essentially public
It's
access,
yeah,
open
exactly.
access.
Yeah, the code is there. You can use it. Anybody can use it. Acast is the UK's biggest distributor of podcasts. So you go on their platform, but they're still using an RSS feed.
Yeah.
And what they're building is like a housing for the RSS
Products
feed.
on top of it,
Precisely.
essentially. Yeah.
But I can upload my podcast to an RSS feed right now, and you can get it wherever you are. It's open source, right?
Yeah.
And so that means that nobody really controls the source of the distribution of podcast, the technology of it, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And then added to that, the barrier to entry is very low.
Yeah.
You only need a couple of mics.
Right.
And they don't even have to be like expensive mics. You can get a decent mic for like £20, £40.
The
£50.
influencer clip-on mics people are using a
little
lot of the
DJIs.
time, right? Like I know people are using good podcasting audio mics as well, but it seems
Exhibit
like
A.
Exhibit A, the one that we are using here today, that you're hearing and watching this through.
Although ours are mismatched, to be fair. I kind of cobbled together our setup from my own rig. But we won't go into tech because I will get
we will be here all day.
We will be here all day.
Yeah, okay.
But essentially, the barrier to entry is low. You only need a couple of mics. The way you distribute it is free. It's open source. And you just need a space in which to record, right? So if you couple all of those things together, the open source RSS feed, the low barrier to entry, the lack of regulation, right?
Basically, anybody, their man and their dog can put out a podcast.
And so we see a lot of that. We see the podcast bros and the podcast girlies, and we see people talking about all sorts of things.
It's also why you have
incorrect.
It's also why you have so many podcasts starting and not continuing. Because I remember us doing a bunch of research on how many people get beyond the 25 episode mark, for example, and so many podcasts just die because you can just get up, try it, and then go. Right? Like you said, the barrier to entry or the bar to entry is really low.
Yeah, it's so low, and so in a way, you could say on the one side that it's democratic. It's democratized because anybody, anywhere, with a cheap mic can
contribute to knowledge, whether it's
knowledge in quotes, and nobody's going to tell them off. There's no regulation. Nobody's going to come down. There's no Ofcom that's going to come down on you, and you can do it for free via the RSS feed.
Absolutely.
Whereas relative to TV, the TV industry, the film industry, the music industry, they require a lot of infrastructure. You can't just upload your 4-part documentary series to the broadcast, the terrestrial.
You could to YouTube.
You could. That's true.
Still takes more than 2 mics and 2 people.
It takes more than 2 mics, but YouTube isn't regulated.
That's true.
Do you see what I mean? So there's an infrastructure around film and TV and music that have been built up over years. There's like record labels in the music industry. There's A&R that sort out the quality. Is this quality?
That's true.
Do you know what I mean?
There's a quality issue with podcasting as well, as people don't know how to find podcasts. And they don't know how to assess whether a podcast is good, or there's nothing helping them to assess. Of course, there are attempts at charts, but you could also, you could argue that there's other things that are driving what's determining quality, right?
Precisely.
Whether you have a celebrity name attached, or whether you have a big corporate entity backing and marketing this thing so that people can know about it, rather than actual quality.
Exactly. There have been a lot of technological innovations that have democratized parts of those industries. I think about the home studio in music, and I think about the cheapness of filming equipment in film and TV. However, there are still institutions, organizations, and infrastructure that are still able to sift the wheat from the chaff,
govern
that are
what
able to
happens in the
govern and
space.
regulate and make it kind of, some might say gatekeeping. And others might say it's quality control. Do you see what I mean? That's how I see podcasting.
Yeah, it's super fascinating because for me, coming into the podcasting space, I obviously entered it as a researcher. And one of the things that I found so fascinating is that this is a democratized medium. I think for someone who's interested in knowledge, knowing how you get ideas to people, the open source nature of podcasting is really exciting, right? At least as a theoretical potential. Like, if anyone can do it and anyone can get their ideas out, what does that mean for people who've been marginalized from having their voice heard in media and in mainstream media and in mainstream platforms? It's quite exciting as a potential. But the thing that I found really odd about it, podcasting in a way, is this whole approach to data. So you have what you've described as this product or this audio disseminated via this open source RSS feed. And then what I can see from the industry is that there's loads of really opaque stuff about who is accessing those podcasts and how many downloads they're getting and how they are circulated. I come from a world in research where people are really interested in open source data and being able to share data. But when I was trying to understand metrics for the podcasting industry as a whole, which shows are popular, how many downloads are they actually getting, how much money are they making, I couldn't find really reliable sources of information around that. I can see attempts by various people to document it, but there's no kind of shared data source that I can see for podcasting. Is that?
That is very, very accurate. And I think it's one of the big issues that we have in podcasting at the moment is that when it comes to measuring or tracking metrics, right? There's no single method, and there's no single unit that we're measuring that tells us which shows are doing what.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Which shows are doing well and why, and what ideas are circulating.
Precisely.
Yeah.
So, for example, some people measure downloads.
Yeah.
Some people measure plays, actual streams of a thing. But if we're not all measuring the same thing as an industry, how do we know the state of the industry?
Yeah.
Do you see what I mean?
And which shows are actually doing well? Because you could have a show that's downloaded, but no one's actually listening, or you're not tracking how long it's being listened for.
Precisely. And obviously, the industries I spoke about before, film, TV, and music, they do have relatively robust ways of measuring data and, most importantly, agreed upon metrics globally.
So how has that been arrived at, say, in TV or film or the other medium?
So I know, for example, if we take the music industry, they have a couple of bodies that measure certain things. In the music industry, which I feel like I can speak to quite confidently, we have the PRS and the MCPS. And they are organizations who track metrics that are agreed upon pretty much globally and then pay out royalties.
Yeah.
In the case of the MCPS, it's the physical copy of a piece of music. So it could be a CD, it could be vinyl, whatever it is, but they track the actual physical thing and then they distribute the royalties based on those sales, right? In the case of the PRS, it's things like radio plays.
Yes.
And so they have, and also licenses for venues. So for example, the Royal Albert Hall will have a PRS license, and then royalties will be collected and distributed to musicians based on various scales, right?
Yeah.
But the metric is very clear. It's plays.
Number of plays, yeah.
It's licenses and it's physical sales of physical mediums.
Yeah.
Right?
And presumably everyone is invested in having those shared metrics because that's how people get paid.
Precisely.
Right? You're determining, if my song has been played here or the thing I wrote has been played here, my royalty, my amount that I earn comes here. So that the industry, in a sense, has to cooperate across the medium to have their commercial needs fulfilled. Effectively,
exactly. And it's login of copyright as well. It's linked intimately to intellectual property and copyright. So it taps into, it's hand in glove with copyright law.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
So those metrics are recognized internationally. So pretty much every country will have its equivalent of the PRS and the MCPS, right? So we can agree on that globally.
Yeah.
In podcasting, that's not the case.
Right. It seems to me that in music, everybody is benefiting commercially from having this shared agreement. Whereas in podcasting, everything is open source. So there's no incentive, because the money that runs through podcasting, as I understand it, is running through the advertising that's attached to it, right?
Yes.
So is there a likelihood that people will ever start sharing that data around plays or are coming up with agreed metrics? Because it doesn't feel like they're not losing money by not, because you're just putting your thing out there.
That's true. And that's a problem, right? And sometimes it feels like, for me with podcasting, when I look at the big players, it feels like they're vying for dominance of this very young medium. Does that make
So
sense?
say more.
So it's almost like, I want our platform to dominate.
Yeah.
I'm not going to mention any people, but it's like, I want ours
Well,
to
let's
be.
talk about Wondery. Wondery is no more, right? Or
Yeah.
has it's been taken on, hasn't it?
Yeah.
But like,
But they're
would
not.
that be?
They have a platform where you can listen to their shows, but they don't. I can't put anything on Wondery.
Exactly. Okay.
They are a production company, in essence,
Okay.
who have a platform that houses their shows.
Right.
Whereas I can put my show on Apple.
Right.
I can put my show on Spotify.
Okay.
I can put my show on YouTube,
Any of
Castbox,
those.
Deezer, all of them.
Okay.
Right. And so I feel like sometimes some of the major players in podcasting want to dominate this young medium. And in order to do that, you have to have something that you can keep that's proprietary, right?
Yeah.
There's a reason why people go to Apple. They particularly like that operating system and the way Apple products work.
Right.
Now, if Apple was open source, why would you go to Apple specifically? You could just go to Samsung and get a different and get an Apple, but that's from Samsung.
Yeah.
Because it's open source and nobody owns the mechanism for distributing podcasts.
Okay.
You can't own that.
Okay.
It's outsourced. It's probably never going to be anything but outsourced. That is the standard for podcasting. Right. So the thing you can own is your platform. Right. The interface, how it looks.
Okay.
And then the things that are on your platform.
Right.
So the things like the metrics, the way you show data, the breadth and the depth and the width of the data that you give.
Okay.
How easy it is to use. And also which platform people like to use the most.
To consume.
So
whether I come via Spotify or
Apple or whatever it is. Does that make sense?
That makes sense. And it also explains the conundrum of the data sharing, is that basically the bigger companies, unlike in research where data might be shared for the social good, they have commercial interests. So as far as you're aware, there are no attempts to share data in your industry.
There have been.
Yeah.
And I think the most notable is what happened last year. So around May 2025, Spotify changed their interface and their system so it displayed how many plays a podcast had. Now, prior to that, you don't know how many plays a podcast. If you go to your podcast app now, you cannot see how many plays it has.
Yeah.
Unless the podcast is on YouTube.
Yeah.
But that's a separate thing, because YouTube is not really a podcasting platform initially. It's a video platform, and it's a whole different beast, right? Outside of that, you never see the number of plays a podcast has. And so for the first time, Spotify turned it on so you could see.
Yep.
Now, this was very interesting to me. Yeah, it really was. It was so interesting because on the one hand, it's just a humorous thing in the sense that there were loads of people like, yeah, my shows, I got 500,000 listens, downloads, whatever it is, you know. And so then they put the plays out, and suddenly the guy who said he's got 500,000 had like 5,000.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? So it's like the emperor's new clothes.
Yeah,
do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so, you know, suddenly the curtain had been lifted.
Yeah.
And instead of this big booming wizard, it was just some little guy, you know what I mean, with his little monocle. And so that was really interesting. I think it kicked up a massive uprising in the industry. Smaller indies were like, this is not helpful.
Yeah.
Because now people, human beings being who they are, they often will gravitate to what has the most plays because it's like, oh, well, that's social proof. They have a lot of plays, so that must be the preeminent source for this particular type of content, right?
Right.
And so they were like, this is going to put people off. It's going to drive our audiences away. We're going to lose audience. And then other people, if they didn't say it exactly, were just embarrassed because they actually don't have 250,000 views. They have 5,000
Well,
views.
this is what I mean about your industry. As coming in as a researcher, I was like, but how do you know what people are saying is the case is the case? It felt like people could claim absolutely anything.
Yeah.
And I can understand why indies would be mad pissed off,
Yeah.
because what is actually happening is a major marketing activity. So the companies, the corporates that are positioned to have a marketing budget to promote shows,
Yeah.
to do big banners everywhere or
Yep.
adverts everywhere, will necessarily get more plays because they
Yes.
have bigger reach.
Yeah.
And an indie cannot compete with that.
No.
And so the false equivalent is that number of downloads is social proof, when
Yes.
it isn't. Number of downloads is sometimes how much money and how much marketing budget you have,
Yes.
and nothing necessarily to do with the quality of the show.
Yes.
Right? So it was a very, like, even for me, I was like, oh, this is interesting data. Like, I remember looking at Betrayal podcast, one of my favorites, whatever that feature was switched on, going into the shower and be like, oh my God, it says the download numbers. Their download numbers were really good. And I was like, wow, imagine we could get
They're
there.
huge.
But it was really quite shocking, because it goes back to this lack of governance. You can literally say anything about how your podcast is doing.
And therein lies a problem around commercialization. Because we don't have an agreed upon metric that we measure, and because we're not transparent about the true metrics, that makes you a risky bet for anyone wanting to invest in or support podcasting. So advertisers, brand sponsors, or whatever it is, because it's like
relative to TV or
relative
film
to TV
or
and
something.
film, right? Because I could give you £100,000 to, based on the fact that you've said you have 500,000 downloads.
Yeah.
But actually,
I have no way to verify.
I don't have any way to verify that.
Yeah.
And so it's not seen as a serious industry.
Yeah.
It's not, it's seen as, okay, if I'm an advertising agency and I've got a budget of, I don't know, however many £1 million to advertise across all these different mediums, podcasting is going to be a tiny fraction of that budget, because I don't understand it. And because I don't understand it, I'm not putting big money behind it.
Yeah.
I understand TV.
Yeah.
I understand film and product placement. I understand music.
Right.
They've been in existence for a really long time. There's established metrics, established channels for getting things out there. And I can verify as well that my advertising spend has hit the mark.
Yeah, no, 100%. It does make me think that if that sort of medium is going to mature, there is going to have to be a moment where people agree it's in the interest, collective commercial interest, to be very precise.
If you can even do that.
If you can, even
that feels like an oxymoron.
That feels like, okay, whatever. But you know what I'm saying? It's all that's going to do is secure corporate dominance even further, I imagine, unless there is like a government department or some attempt at regulating how that works. That kind of makes sure that indies are also not left out of that. There's going to need to be some sort of agreed measure, right?
Absolutely.
So that's super fascinating. I also feel like this lack of regulation has played out in a whole bunch of other ways that have really been quite interesting for me to watch coming in. The scandal of last year, Steven Bartlett of Diary of a CEO hosting fame.
One of the biggest shows in the UK.
Massive, globally, in fact.
Yeah.
And for that to be a British export show says quite a huge thing, because people listening to him in America, in the States, where, he's competing with huge American podcasts, right? And he got trashed essentially online following a BBC investigation and expose into mis and disinformation through his podcast. And this really caught my attention, not only because I was in the podcasting world, but because the specific scandals were about how he had started it as a business podcast and then moved into focusing a lot on health, essentially because it's a big hot button topic and you can make big claims within the health space, but also because some of his business and commercial interests are in the health space. Like Huel he's involved in Huel, isn't he? And so you could see this kind of creep of the content, was their argument, on the Diary of a CEO. And they reported that there were an average of 14 potentially problematic or dangerous claims on a selection of podcasts they had reviewed around health. And they included platforming of particular scientists who said that you could cure cancer or prevent cancer, mostly cure, with particular kinds of diet. A little bit like your pastor that you spoke of earlier, talking about, you can be healed through Jesus. And then they had expert academics coming on and saying, like, this is how dangerous these claims are. People will stop seeking treatment and try to do treatment alone through diet alone, and they can lose their lives. And I just thought, yeah, that is, in my world where we're talking about mis and disinformation in the political sphere and in all sorts of spheres, podcasting, because everybody can turn up and do it, becomes a site where all kinds of knowledge, good knowledge or frankly poor knowledge, can be circulated by anyone with no kind of intervention.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's so sad, because even with the Steven Bartlett situation, I kind of wonder if the only reason why it was flagged in such a public way is because he had done a deal with the BBC to put episodes of his on BBC iPlayer, which is the player that the BBC has, for those who aren't in the UK, for us to play BBC content online, essentially. But those episodes aren't on there now.
Okay.
The pages are there, but you can't play the episodes. And
That's
I'm wondering
interesting.
if there's some alignment there, because the moment you interface with a BBC,
Which is a public broadcaster.
regulation comes in.
Right.
Because they're regulated by Ofcom.
Okay.
So I'm wondering if that's where that came from.
That
Because it's actually
would make
very rare
sense.
for there to be a public expose like that of a podcast.
Yeah, that would actually make sense.
It's interesting talking about Steven Bartlett's show. As I was researching for this episode, of the hundreds of episodes that he's released of Diary of a CEO, something like, I think only 7 of the episodes featured Black women. And in terms of just women in general, regardless of ethnicity, about 2% were women.
It doesn't surprise me as someone who's listened to his show.
Listen.
Yeah,
it's very male heavy.
Yeah.
And of course, we have our biases. People like to see themselves, and he's a man, and he brings
it's
on
only
men.
2% though of women, from like thinking about, maybe I've listened to episodes that feature a lot more women, but yeah.
But that's the beautiful thing about podcasting, in a way, is that you can select what you listen to.
Yeah, okay.
Do you see what I mean?
Yeah.
So you can go on a show and just, I only want to listen to these episodes, these topics, for example. But yeah, I thought that was really interesting, just the lack of diversity. And I remember he did a feminism episode, and I thought, okay, this is going to be great.
I saw that one.
Yeah, because I was thinking feminism, because he'd done a few debates, I think, at that point. So I was like, okay, this could be interesting. And then I pressed play on the thing, and it was literally 3 white women. And by judging by them, it felt like they were middle class and maybe upper middle class. And I was like, how can you have a discussion about feminism and it's only white women, and a certain kind of white woman?
Yeah, okay. Like, I was super cynical. First of all, I would not go to Steven Bartlett for any of my ideas about feminism. So
No,
I was
I wouldn't.
cynical from the jump. I'm not going to lie.
Yeah.
But I was just like, I mean, what shocked me more when that feminism episode came out was like, okay, while I didn't think it was as low as 2%, if that's the figure of women represented, I definitely noticed a notable lack of representation of Black women and women in general on the podcast. And I was like, well, I guess it's Diary of a CEO. Who do people think CEOs are? And they often imagine a man, and it has all of the usual gendered constructs to the starting of the podcast. So I would never...
But Diary?
Yeah, but of
women, girls, diaries?
Yeah, sure, but of a freaking CEO. I mean, it's giving peak bro culture. Sorry, I'm not trying to cuss anyone, but it is giving peak bro culture. But I still go and, I listen to lots of things. That's his world, yeah. I take it for what it is. And yeah, okay, we've seen Michelle Obama, very mainstream, on his show.
Yeah.
I think you said Patricia Bright.
Patricia Bright has been on there. Africa Brooke
has been on there. Okay,
there's
fine.
Some notable women.
So those are interesting. But I was more shocked, frankly, that he would have the audacity to take on feminism. I mean, it's good. We need men talking about women's topics. We need men to have an interest in feminism. And in that sense, like, kudos, you're introducing your audience to it. But I just think all the brilliant feminist thinkers that you could have on, like, there's something about your lens and your positionality as a person impacting how you curate a show in the first place,
That's
right?
true.
If there were, I would say, when I saw the lineup, or even when I heard he was doing something on feminism, I just immediately went, oh God,
Oh,
oh
really?
God. Yes, I was like, you better have good advisors,
Yeah.
because you've got to know in life your, for want of a better term, blind spots,
Yeah.
right? If you don't do or think about feminism, then I hope you've got a good team of advisors or women around you, which seemingly he has women around him, to advise you. And if those women are anything other than white women, the first thing they're going to tell you is, there's a thing called black feminism. White women don't speak for all women.
Yeah.
And so you would hope that the show would be curated with some basic knowledge about that.
Yeah.
As
and
it was, the lineup, which I didn't watch the show because I just looked at the lineup and I
couldn't.
looked at the trailer and I thought to myself, is this the nature of the debate we're having? So I'm not saying this necessarily to cuss him, but what it did show me is that all of this talk in podcasting about this being a democratized medium, but the big shows that you see consistently represented and doing well, even as I was looking down the charts, doing my own research, there's a company called Edison Research, right, that publishes its own charts around podcasting, despite this shared metrics, right? And I'm not seeing that many women there, and I'm definitely not seeing that many black women there. And it was just kind of like, well, this kind of talk of a democratized medium is kind of a myth,
Yeah.
actually. And you can tell by the fact that I wonder if that could have been curated in that way in other mediums.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
What, TV and film?
You're
I'm
gonna
telling you,
yeah,
listen,
okay.
one thing I will tell you is that we have a representation problem in
That's true.
the entertainment industry, full stop, point blank. It's actually worse for working class representation now than it was in the 70s. Less than 10% of the people in the entertainment industry, maybe we can talk specifically about TV and film, are working class.
Yeah. That's true.
It was better in the 70s.
Yeah.
Now, part of that is that when there's a cost of living crisis and you're a working class person, you can't be fannying about trying to get into an industry that's gatekept by upper middle class people and has all these hoops you have to jump through, and you're not getting paid for any of those hoops. You have to go out and work and get actual real cash money.
Yeah.
So there's part of that is that people just dropping out of the industry and going, I have to earn real money, right? But it's still really, really bad.
It's also that decision makers go to who they know, and who they know has track record doing a lot of those things.
Yes.
And if those people have traditionally been excluded because they're working class or for another reason, they're not going to be the ones that get defaulted to when there's less money flowing.
Precisely.
Right?
Yeah.
So
it's that age-old thing of last in, first out.
Yeah.
That's
exactly.
just the bottom line.
Exactly.
You know, and very often the people that are the last in to most industries tend to be women. They tend to be people of color. And God forbid you're a woman who's black
and working class.
So you are definitely last in, and you are absolutely the first out. So in this last round of like just crazy recessions as a result of so many things, AI, cost of living crisis and so on, has been black women.
Yeah. Yeah, it's been all
who've
sorts
lost their
of
jobs at a far higher rate than any other group of people.
Yeah. It's true. There's been various studies put out about that, particularly in America at the moment as well. Yeah, I mean, I think this is one of the things I found fascinating about the podcasting space. And I got really frustrated when I was looking at, for example, the lineup of Steven Bartlett's feminism show, or generally the charts and this narrative of democratization. I was like, I actually want us to be commissioned to do some research on the state of diversity and equity specifically in the industry, because that's literally the field I came out of, as a sociologist. And I would be looking for stuff, and there was just so little research. Broader entertainment industry, yes. Podcasting, no. And then, despite putting in funding applications to research institutes, we didn't get it. But last year, or 2024, the Annenberg Inclusion Initiative actually published a piece of research, because they managed to do the thing I wanted to see done,
Yeah.
right? And they were basically asking who's really being heard in podcasting. And the findings of their research, and we can link to it in the show notes, were that nearly 2/3 of podcast hosts are men.
2/3.
Yeah. I mean, on their
Wow.
methodology, which we'll link to in the
Crazy.
show notes, but 2/3, this one won't surprise you, over 75% are white.
Mm-hmm.
Not surprised.
Mm-hmm.
Women of colour are almost invisible within podcasting.
Yeah.
Those were the 3 key findings, which just literally,
Yeah.
mirror what you talked about over the broader entertainment industry. And in fact, one of the things that was said in response to that research was, all this time, people have been talking about podcasting as a medium that was new and had potential for change, and their stats were worse than other parts of the entertainment industry.
Yeah, it doesn't surprise me. And
Yeah.
it's such a shame because podcasting had the potential to almost chart a new path
Mm,
and show a different way of doing entertainment. And instead, it rapidly, over the last decade or two, has basically come to be worse than
mm,
the other industries.
mm.
And that's a shame.
So why do you think that has been the case, despite all this low bar to entry, open access? Is it all about commercial interest and who can be seen and pay for visibility, or?
I think it's, those stats don't really surprise me. The 2/3, I was a bit like, oh wow, I didn't realize it was as bad as that. A medium, an entertainment medium, is always a reflection of society.
Yeah.
So that's the first thing.
Yep.
So that doesn't surprise me. Also, you got to follow the money,
Mm,
right? The people funding entertainment tend to be people with the people with the deepest pockets, for sure, who see the power of the entertainment industry, the media, to transmit ideas
yeah.
and change hearts and minds. The people with the deepest pockets tend to be right-wing leaning people,
Mm,
the billionaires, the ones who want to protect their revenue and get as much revenue and get tax breaks and all of that good stuff, right?
mm-hmm,
So they tend to have the deepest pockets, and they're the ones who tend, particularly in the last few years, to flood the industry.
mm.
And podcasting is a very easy industry to flood because there is no concrete
Control.
way of commercializing
Yeah.
and controlling and regulating.
Yeah.
So it's the Wild West.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? He with the deepest pockets wins. So over the last few years, I think about some people that are notable for their drift towards the right. And I think about people like Russell Brand. So I remember when he first released Trues,
Mm.
which is that's a portmanteau as well, true and news. And he put
Oh,
them together and it made the Trues, right?
yeah.
And his thing was, I want to show a different side to the news,
Mm.
a more equal side to the news, more left-leaning things to counteract the right-wing conservative narrative. That's where he started from.
Really? That's
Then,
wild. I did not know. Yeah, okay. I did not
yeah.
know this.
And then his show evolved into more sort of like woo-woo. It was really weird. He was
Yeah,
like
he did
looking
spiritual
like Jesus and
fuckboy.
sandals and like crystals and like lots of like meditation, and he had gurus on, and it kind of morphed into that. And then in the last few years, it's morphed into like really right-wing kind of Christian nationalism type thing. And he's not the only one. We've seen it with Jordan Peterson. I remember when I first started listening to Jordan Peterson, he was a psychologist talking about, because he's a psychologist, he's a professor of psychology, right?
Mhm.
And so he would do talks on psychology, and it was really interesting. And then over the years, he's just morphed again into things that just sound so right-wing, lots of Christian stuff, even though he says he's not a Christian.
Yeah, but Christian nationalist
Nationalism type
thinking or
stuff.
patriarchal
Yeah.
thinking is just
Yeah.
so strong.
So strong. Why? Because they have the money.
They also have the audience. I'm so
And the
glad that
audience.
you brought this up, right? Because that was the thing. So to move from who is represented, which was the kind of discussion we were having with the Diary of a CEO thing, it's also really about whose voice is allowed to be heard and what kinds of voices are allowed to be heard within
Yes.
podcasting, right?
Mhm.
Who gets to shape media discourse, shape politics, shape thinking, the society that we're building. And obviously, if you have 75% men dominating that, or sorry, 2/3 of podcast hosts dominating that, and 75% white people, that is going to continue to shape, as it already does, the way those decisions play out.
Absolutely.
And there was actually this incredibly interesting study in the aftermath of Trump's election, where, do you remember it got dubbed the podcast election?
Yes, it did. Yes.
Because the right-wing Trump and co had managed to successfully get themselves on so many podcasts and use that platform to spread ideas, like Joe Rogan being one of them, right? So Media Matters released this really interesting piece of research after the podcast election, the dubbed podcast election, which explored what kinds of political views or ideologies were represented on podcasts. And I'm going to link to the methodology that they used in the show notes, because it's actually super interesting and really, it was quite thorough as a methodology. They had multiple people coding the shows and saying what political ideologies that were reflected in those shows, because these were not shows that were presented as politics shows. They were entertainment shows. They were comedy shows. So in fact, Russell Brand, who you just mentioned, good example, he was coded in there as being ideologically right.
That's so interesting, because you wouldn't have said that at the beginning.
Yeah,
Absolutely
exactly.
not.
I'm pretty sure. I'll double check that. But he was coded as being ideologically right. And they had loads of others, like Trevor Noah was in there, ideologically left. You had Joe Rogan in there, ideologically right.
Okay.
Jordan B. Peterson, the same. Candace Owens, the same. Charlie Kirk, who had a following of 18.6 million, also obviously ideologically right. And what their research showed was that people are consuming ideas about politics, how to vote, how to think, from all manner of people, from comedians, from show hosts, people who have ostensibly nothing to do with politics, who may be platforming them from time to time. And of all these shows, the vast majority were right-leaning.
Wow.
Right? So you had a few exceptions. You had the Young Turks.
Oh, yes.
They've
been going a long time, since the start of YouTube, I think.
Yeah, but
if I'm not mistaken.
If you look at their audience size, not as big as many of the right-wing shows.
Yeah, we don't have money on the left.
Yeah, well, let's get into that. It's exactly
we are on the left. We are poor.
Yeah, the biggest one was Trevor Noah.
Wow.
The biggest one, 21.2 million following, was Trevor Noah. The bottom line is these shows have global influence. And if there's anything we've seen in recent years, it's that the right are organizing globally.
Yes, they are.
You know, these guys are in cahoots with each other. When you see a Tommy Robinson here, they're talking about Charlie Kirk over there. They're talking about, this is a global movement. And what's so scary about it, in a way, is it feels to me, when you look at a piece of research like that the right-wing entities have created whole media ecosystems. And on the left, we have a few progressive shows, and we're ignoring the potential and the way in which ideas become really sticky politically through mediums such as entertainment at our peril.
And I wonder if some of that is a class thing, in the sense that I wonder if the left just kind of looks down on it, because it's not
respectable.
And it's not intellectual. Do you know what I mean?
I do think there's a class dimension to it.
I think when I think about the right, I feel like they love all the rough and tumble and the spectacle and the performance. They even talk in an entertaining way. There's a talk that a lot of these right-wing people have, and I've seen it with Russell Brand's evolution. He didn't start out talking the way he talks. Now he talks like a preacher, just fast, like really fast and staccato. And it's almost like they're really trying to like put the idea in there. And do you know what I mean? It's like a performance. Whereas him before that, he talked at a relatively normal pace. He's still Russell Brand, but I wonder if the right are just more into things being larger than life. More is more.
But are they more into it, or is this a very specific playbook? And the reason I ask that is, the game changer for me was when you gave me your take after we watched Vince McMahon's documentary on Netflix, right? And Vince McMahon was the guy behind World Wrestling Entertainment. And it was major entertainment, and it was exported again globally. Like, I remember watching WWE every Friday night as a kid in Botswana. And, you know, when I was rewatching this documentary and seeing old clips, I was like, oh my God, this is the entire backdrop to my childhood. Things boys did in the school playgrounds, having watched WWE. And so much of it was misogynistic
Oh, yeah.
and patriarchal
Yeah.
and gross, the way women wrestlers were treated. But what struck me was we would just be watching it, and then casually Trump was there in the background.
Mhm.
And they had talked about, you know, Vince McMahon had talked about making money in world wrestling entertainment was really about what story you told. And so they would have these storylines that ran throughout each kind of entertainment match, and it would be one character or one wrestler pitted against another. And what they realized over time is that people got bored of the formula. So they made the stories more and more extreme.
Mhm.
And they had these really good guy versus bad guy type storylines, really just embodying the worst of American politics, frankly. And then they suddenly got to this point where they realized that people actually really liked the bad guy versus the bad guy, not the old story. And it was the heel versus the heel was the way they described it in the documentary. And when I saw that and I saw Trump there in the documentary, I was like, shit, are these guys using the same playbook? Because they're going up and creating the Charlie Kirks, the Tommy Robinsons, the Andrew Tates. It's just bad guys and bad guys. And I'm listening to some of the conversations we've had on this podcast. Teachers teaching young boys who think, you know, Andrew Tate is, you know, like a god. He's materialistic. He's got all these things, these trappings. And I'm like, it kind of feels like we are watching this, you know, that even when you look at like Elon and Trump's very public falling out,
Yeah.
somewhat after you can say on the one
That's
hand,
almost like two wrestlers.
no, but seriously,
Yeah.
you can say on the one hand, okay, this is, you know, you've got one guy. The respectable leftist narrative would be like, oh, you've got one guy who's a narcissist and another guy who's a narcissist, and they can't, you know, this was inevitable. This conflict was going to happen. And I'm like, but I know we're going into conspiracy theory potential.
Go there. You know, I
but
love a conspiracy theory.
You really do. But no, really, how do we know that that is not manufactured entertainment to get buy-in?
Of course, and to hide things and to obscure,
To
distract, to do you know what I mean? Like there's so many, and they're happy to play that game. They love the spectacle of it.
Exactly.
You know,
and the refusal to engage with it, even if that's not true, the refusal of a certain respectable quarter of citizens on the left to even engage with that idea means we're not even seeing potential threats coming.
No, we're not.
And we're not even
That's why
recognizing.
we got blindsided. That's why we got blindsided by all the stuff that's happened.
Precisely. But we're not organizing media collectives that can give people accessible ways to consume political information that's both engaging and responsible and gives people something valuable to build societies on.
I agree. And we have seen pockets of that. Trevor Noah is an example in the
Yeah, he's
podcasting
brilliant.
space. And in the political space, people like Zoran Mamdani in New York.
Yes.
He raps.
He raps.
He goes out on the street and he's performing. He's got videos. He's using TikTok. It all looks really cinematic, but he's a politician.
Yeah.
Right? And he won. So I think we're
even
waking
Zach
up.
in the Green Party.
Yeah, exactly.
He's recently hired someone who I ended up working with a little while ago to do all his video and socials. And he's been going on comedy shows.
Absolutely.
You know?
And going toe to toe. So we are waking up. However, not quick enough.
Yeah.
And the thing I worry about is that in the UK specifically, we have a general election coming up in 2029, which means that that's where the next Prime Minister of the UK basically takes power, right? And we have our equivalent of Trump, and his name is Nigel Farage, and he is the leader of the Reform Party in the UK. And I'm looking at now, I'm like 26, 27, 28, then the general election in 29. So what, 3.5 years? And I'm like, have we woken up enough on the left to counteract the force that is Nigel Farage and the Reform Party?
And the even American-based or global-based podcasters who will still be infiltrating the minds of people here.
And will champion someone like him. He'll be on those shows. He'll be in the pubs with his pint looking like a gormless idiot.
Yeah, if not by platforming him or mentioning him, by ideologically supporting ideas that
Exactly.
sort of feed that
Yeah.
ecosystem or that political group.
Yeah, and I don't know how on the left we get organized, number one. Number two, I don't know how we get that kind of money.
That's
Because
the
because
concern.
it
These
feels
people are
like we don't
backed.
have anyone who can give that kind. I mean, we're talking about hundreds of millions of pounds.
Yeah. It's actually wild. Like, we've got Novara Media
Yes,
in this country
they're brilliant.
who are maybe more political than your like Trevor Noahs. But I genuinely want to know who are, first of all, who are the big women podcasters that are being platformed in the charts in this country, in the UK.
Okay, because in America, I know they've got Call Me Daddy.
Yes. Are they the ones that put Kamala?
Yeah, Kamala Harris.
Harris
But she
on.
came to the thing too. That's what I mean about the left. Trump had already been doing his media presentations. And Kamala, I mean, obviously, she also wasn't nominated soon enough because Biden held on for too long. So I get that. But also, she should have been going on Trevor Noah, Call Me Daddy, all of them. She should even have gone on Joe Rogan. I think Joe Rogan would have had her run. Who knows?
Well, maybe
actually, it
they
depends
will.
where his
It
money
also
comes from.
depends how it's curated.
Yeah.
That thing, that whole talk, because you can come on, but if you're set up to fail by the kinds
That's
of
the
questions
problem.
you're asked,
Yeah, that's
you've
the
got a problem. And that's what I mean. That's why it's so
Yeah, it's true.
critical that there are alternative platforms that ask questions that give us a fighting chance.
Agreed.
And I don't see them.
Agreed.
And that is wild. And in fact, was part of the delusions of grandeur that was like, we need to start our podcast. We need to have a role to play in 2029, even though we now have 500 subscribers or whatever.
Listen, that's 500 people. That could be exponential. You never know.
You just
know
don't know what
you
will
don't know what's
happen.
going to happen.
But
3.5 years is still some time.
Yeah, and what you can't do is sit down and wait.
No.
And wait for this carry on to be carrying on.
From your perspective, what responsibility comes with us having listeners now? We don't have a lot, but we have got people listening across the globe.
Yeah, it's an interesting one because one thing I didn't expect was to feel responsible so quickly. And I do feel, even with a few listeners across the globe, an added responsibility to at least not contribute to mis and disinformation. It's very obvious that even with a small number of listeners, people are actually engaging with our ideas. And the way I know that is because we get really long voice notes, including from people we don't know, or people sending us ideas to discuss on the show.
Our
and then
engagement
you
is
go
high.
Really high, right?
And that's a metric that I think should be measured. That isn't
It's
in
not.
podcasting.
Yeah. And it's really, when people message us, it's quite like, I know I can't just sit and listen and give a flimsy answer. I need to really engage with what people are saying. And often it's extending my knowledge. Sometimes it's correcting me. Like recently on one of our episodes, I said that Clara Amfo had said you can't have the rhythm without the blues.
And
right?
I remember kind of side-eyeing you a little bit and thinking, maybe, okay, I don't think so.
I said it with my whole chest.
Wrong and strong.
Wrong and strong, because she was the person who said it very publicly during BLM. Now, if I stop and think about it, I can see exactly why you're side-eyeing me. That is the kind of thing that is such a long trajectory
and that's
in music.
Definitely American.
Yeah,
as well.
Exactly. Like, why would I attribute it to her and say it with my whole chest? But I did. And it didn't it was the one episode where we didn't get a chance to go through and fact check to the level we normally did, because we recorded it one day and we put it out the next day, which we don't normally do. We normally record it and then fact check things and whatever. And one of our listeners, or one of the people who tunes in on YouTube, an American guy, cussed me. Rightly, he should have cussed me. I mean, it did get a bit tribalistic and a bit like, it was a bit intense for a correction, but it was fair. I get it. And I get that misattribution is like a really sticky thing. So I feel like our responsibility has to be to be very careful, but also not be so careful you end up saying nothing, because we're a really small outfit. Even to fact check as much as we do takes a lot of work, right?
Yeah.
But I feel a responsibility to at least not spread mis and disinformation.
Yeah. That makes
Yeah.
sense. That makes sense.
What about you, and, like, what do you feel comes with having these listeners and being responsible?
I think all of the things that you've said, but also we have to take risks.
Yeah.
And I think our show has taken a lot of risks because in order to have great dialogue and conversation and have ideas evolve in a beautiful way, we have to be able to take the rough with the smooth.
Mm.
You know what I mean? The stuff that's uncomfortable and tricky. Do you know what I mean? Rather than
Absolutely.
aiming for perfection and political correctness and that all of the time, it's like, no, life isn't like that. And we have to take all of the things. And I
Yeah.
think on our show, I think we do that quite well. We have tricky conversations, we go to uncomfortable places, we tackle things that most people would rather not. And I think on the left, I think we need more of that.
I'm gonna be honest, I think that's probably one of the most important things you've said. I feel really glad to have had a space to unpack some of my, I don't know, podcasting industry dilemmas,
Yeah.
concerns, things that I've noticed. It kind of felt good actually to sort
Yeah,
of
it
do a bit
did.
of sense making.
Yeah. And I think for me as well, because I'm so in it, I don't often have the chance to step back and look at it.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? Because
Yeah.
I'm always just in there doing the doing and, producing and writing and the fun stuff.
Yeah.
But I never get a time to step back and have a bit of a critical analysis, critical thinking about the industry.
No, totally. I feel like one of the things about doing this stepping back for me is that it's highlighted just how important it is that women are showing up in the
Yes,
podcasting space, that Black women are
hugely.
showing up in the podcasting space,
Yeah.
and that people who are willing to speak to progressive futures
Yep.
and to do so while knowing they could get it wrong, that they could get corrected.
Hmm.
That feels like a really important takeaway from me, because particularly that Media Matters research, looking at it, is
Yep.
stark. And
Exactly.
the lack of representation, if we don't keep showing up as women, I don't mean just us, but other people we know in the podcasting space, and if people don't keep tuning in to stuff and sharing their ideas and stretching us, we are in for a rough time, certainly in the
Absolutely.
UK from 2029.
Absolutely.
Um, yeah, so here's to more podcasting.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for joining us on this episode of Rigour and Flow. That's all we've got time for today. As always, please like, share, subscribe, rate, leave a review. You can also buy us a coffee, either a monthly subscription or just a one-off donation. It really helps to keep the show sustainable. And if you can't, don't worry. We ask you to share, like, subscribe, rate, and leave a review. And we'll put the link to the Buy Me a Coffee in the description. Anything else you want to add?
Just help us fight the pod bros.
That part.